You stand on a sun-baked street in ancient Athens. The sounds of merchants bargaining and the distant clang of a blacksmith drift on the air. You might envision grand philosophers debating in the agora or mighty warriors preparing for battle. But what about the other half of humanity, the women whose lives unfolded largely unseen? For centuries, their stories have been whispered in shadows or sometimes not told at all. We will step beyond the familiar narratives of gods and heroes to explore the daily realities, the quiet triumphs and the profound struggles of women across ancient Greece. From the protected courtyards of Athens to the fierce training grounds of Sparta, and from the sacred temples to the bustling marketplaces, we uncover the tapestry of their forgotten existence. Join us as we bring their voices back into the light. You step through the bustling street, leaving the clamor of the agora behind. The heavy wooden door of an Athenian home swings inward, revealing not another public space, but a private world, secluded and quiet. The sunlight, so bright outside, here filters through an open roof or a high window, dappling the central courtyard. This is the heart of the oikos, the household, and the domain of the Athenian wife. You notice the air is cooler here, perhaps scented with drying herbs, the subtle aroma of wool, or the earthy smell of stored grains. This courtyard, often an open-air space with a small altar or a simple well, forms the nucleus around which the family's life revolves. It is a space for light and air, yet it also serves as a gatekeeper, separating the male-dominated public sphere from the intimate female-centered private world. Your eyes are drawn to a specific area, usually on the upper floor or at the back of the house, known as the gynaikonitis, the women's quarters. This is where the Athenian wife, the Kyria, spent the vast majority of her life, a space designed for modesty, protection, and productivity. You can almost hear the soft rustle of linen, the quiet murmur of women's voices, the rhythmic thud of a loom. You see her there, perhaps, overseeing a group of female slaves sorting wool, meticulously folding freshly washed garments, or preparing food for the midday meal. Her days are a complex ballet of management and labor. She is the discerning manager of the home's finances, carefully budgeting and ensuring resources are not wasted. She is the vigilant keeper of the larder, the one who knows precisely how much olive oil, grain, and wine remains. She is the diligent supervisor of the domestic staff, from cooks and cleaners to nurses and spinners, ensuring every task is completed to exacting standards. And most profoundly, she is the primary educator and caregiver of her young children, instilling in them the values and skills necessary for their future roles in Athenian society. Her worth is measured not in public acclaim or intellectual debate, but in the smooth, efficient running of her household. Every jar of preserved olives accounted for, every garment beautifully woven, every meal nourishing and plentiful, is a testament to her diligence and skill. The oikos, the household, was the fundamental unit of Athenian society, the bedrock upon which the polis was built, and she, the Kyria, was its silent, powerful cornerstone. Imagine the constant rhythmic thud of the loom, a pervasive background hum in these women's lives. You might see the intricate patterns of a peplos or a chiton taking shape under nimble fingers, threads of crimson and indigo weaving not just fabric, but stories untold, traditions maintained, and beauty created. This is not merely a craft. It is an art, a vital economic activity, and a profound expression of identity. A woman's skill at the loom was a source of great pride, a tangible contribution to her family's wealth and status, as well as a reflection of her own character and virtue. It was also a shared activity, a precious time for conversation and companionship with other women and female slaves, forging bonds of sisterhood even within the confines of the home. Perhaps it was during these hours that the news of the neighborhood was quietly exchanged, or advice on child-rearing discreetly sought. But how did she come to be here, in this meticulously managed private world? You understand that for the Athenian woman, marriage was rarely, if ever, a matter of romantic love or personal choice. She was betrothed, often by her father or male guardian, her kyrios, to a man sometimes twice her age, perhaps even older. You might envision a young girl, barely into her teens, leaving her childhood home, often with tears, to enter the unfamiliar household of her husband. Her dowry, a significant financial asset provided by her family, represented her contribution to the marital oikos, though it legally remained hers and would return to her if the marriage ended. Her primary duty, her raison d'etre, was to produce legitimate children, especially sons, to carry on the family name and inherit its property. This was her vital role in the perpetuation of the Athenian polis, the city-state, ensuring its future citizens and maintaining its traditions. Fidelity was paramount for her, for the legitimacy of heirs, while for her husband, the same expectation was significantly relaxed. You observe how rarely she ventures beyond these protective walls. The bustling streets of Athens, so vibrant and full of public activity, were largely forbidden to her, unless for specific religious festivals, family funerals, or significant ceremonies, and even then she would be accompanied by a slave or female relative. She cannot vote, she cannot speak in the assembly, she cannot own property in her own name, and she cannot represent herself in court. Legally, she remains a perpetual minor, always under the guardianship of a male relative. First her father, then her husband, and if widowed, her son or nearest male kin. This legal helplessness meant her rights and welfare were always mediated through a man. You might feel a sense of profound limitation, imagining such a circumscribed existence, where the public sphere, so celebrated in Athenian life, was almost entirely closed off. What kind of education did she receive? You won't find her debating philosophy in the academy or reciting epic poetry in public performances. Her education was practical and intensely domestic. She learned to manage the household with precision, to spin and weave with artistry, to supervise slaves with authority, to care for children with compassion, and perhaps to read and write enough to keep household accounts or manage correspondence with other women in the household or family. These skills, however undervalued by the philosophical elite who focused on rhetoric and logic, were absolutely fundamental to the survival and prosperity of the Athenian family. She was educated to be the silent pillar of the home, the indispensable administrator of private life, not a voice in the public square. Yet, despite these pervasive restrictions, you begin to see subtle avenues of agency and expression that allowed Athenian women to transcend the confines of their homes. Religious life offered a vital outlet, a sanctioned opportunity to step out into the public realm, albeit under specific ritualistic conditions. You might imagine her joining other women in grand processions during the Panathenaic festival, carrying sacred baskets laden with offerings for Athena, her goddess. Or perhaps she participated in the mysterious Eleusinian mysteries, finding deep spiritual fulfillment and a sense of camaraderie with other female initiates, a shared experience that connected them beyond their individual households. These were rare but powerful moments when the public and private worlds converged for Athenian women, when their collective presence was acknowledged and celebrated, when their piety was seen as crucial to the well-being of the entire polis. In these sacred spaces, their voices, though ritualized, could be heard, and their collective power felt. You hear the echoes of male voices, the playwrights, the philosophers, the politicians, often speaking of women with a complex mixture of reverence for their role as mothers and managers, and suspicion or condescension regarding their intellect or capacity for public life. They are often idealized as chaste guardians of the oikos, symbols of domestic order and purity. This ideal, however, stands in stark contrast to other types of women in Athenian society, such as the hetaira, highly educated courtesans who moved freely in male intellectual circles, offering companionship and conversation not available from the respectable kyria. But the kyria's role was far more central to the perpetuation of the Athenian way of life, however much it was confined. But you also sense a deeper, unarticulated reality that lies beneath these male pronouncements. What did she think, this woman of the Athenian courtyard? What were her hopes, her fears, her quiet joys, her frustrations with a life so meticulously prescribed. You try to peer past the veil of historical silence, to glimpse the inner life of this Athenian woman. Perhaps she found profound satisfaction in nurturing her children, in watching them grow and thrive. Perhaps she discovered immense pride in the intricate beauty of her weaving, in the quiet wisdom she gleaned from managing a complex and often challenging household. She might have cultivated deep and enduring friendships with her female relatives and loyal slaves, forging bonds of solidarity and shared experience within her confined world. Childbirth, a constant risk in ancient times, would have been a recurring and often terrifying reality, with high infant and maternal mortality rates. Yet, the successful rearing of children, particularly sons, would have brought immense joy and purpose. You also recognize her crucial role in funerary rites, where women prepared the deceased, led laments, and participated in processions, another public expression of their deep connection to family and community. Her strength was not the strength of the warrior or the orator, but the enduring strength of the sustainer, the quiet architect of daily life, the one who ensured the continuity of family tradition and the very future of Athens. Her world was small, perhaps, when viewed through the lens of modern freedom, but it was undeniably essential. Without her tireless work, her careful management, her capacity for nurturing, the grand narratives of Athenian democracy, philosophy, and art would crumble into dust. You realize that while her name may not be etched into marble or sung in epic poems, her contribution was woven into the very fabric of Athenian society, as fundamental and vital as any decree issued from the Knicks. Her life, unfolding largely within the shadows of the courtyard, was not insignificant. It was a life of profound purpose, of silent power, and of often unrecognized, yet utterly indispensable importance. This is the first step in bringing her story, and the stories of countless other women like her, out of the shadows and into the light. You stand now at the threshold of another revelation about her life, a truth as pervasive as the Athenian sun and as unyielding as the marble of the Parthenon. It is a truth that defines her very existence from the moment she draws her first breath until her last. Her world, essential as it was, operated under a constant, unwavering male oversight. Her autonomy, as we understand it today, was not merely limited, it was non-existent. Imagine a pervasive presence, a shadow that moved with you not menacingly, but with an absolute authority that guided every significant step of your life. This was the Kyrios, the guardian. For every Athenian woman, regardless of her social standing, there was always a Kyrios. This male figure was her legal representative, her voice in the public sphere, the one who held absolute control over her legal and financial affairs. He was her gateway to the world beyond her household and often even within it. From the moment you were born, if you were a girl in ancient Athens, your Kyrios was your father. He oversaw your upbringing, your education in the home, your very sustenance. He decided your future not through consultation but through decree. He was the one who would ultimately arrange your marriage, the most significant transition of your life, without ever truly seeking your personal consent. Your feelings, your desires, your aspirations, while perhaps acknowledged in the intimacy of a family conversation, held no legal weight in the formal contract of betrothal. This was a transaction, a binding of two households, and you were the precious yet voiceless commodity at its center. When the time came for you to marry, the Kyriaship transferred. Your father, having negotiated the terms, having agreed upon the dowry that solidified the union and protected your future, would hand you over to your husband. Your husband then became your Kyrios. This was not merely a change in residence. It was a fundamental shift in legal guardianship. You moved from the legal authority of one man to that of another. This new Kyrios would represent you in all legal matters, manage any property you might bring to the marriage as part of your dowry, and make decisions on your behalf. Consider the dowry itself. This was not a gift to your husband, but a form of financial security for you. It remained legally yours even if managed by your husband, and was intended to provide for you should the marriage end through divorce or his death. Yet, even this vital safety net was not under your direct control. Your Kyrios, whether father or husband, was the administrator, the custodian of your financial well-being. You could not sell land, you could not enter into major contracts, you could not borrow large sums of money, you could not initiate legal proceedings, all without the express permission and involvement of your Kyrios. Your signature, had you been able to write one, held no legal power on its own. Think about the implications of this. Imagine wanting to buy a piece of fabric for a new tunic, but needing your husband's consent for the transaction, not just for the money, but for the very act of engaging in commerce. Imagine a dispute arising with a neighbor, and needing your Kyrios to speak on your behalf in court, to argue your case, because your own voice carried no legal weight in such a forum. You were, in essence, a perpetual minor in the eyes of the law, always under the protection and control of a male guardian. This system was deeply embedded in Athenian society, a cornerstone of its legal and social structure. It wasn't necessarily born of malice, but of a deeply ingrained cultural belief about the nature of women and the importance of property. Athenian society believed that women, due to their perceived emotional nature and lack of experience in the public sphere, were not capable of managing complex legal or financial affairs. It was also about maintaining the integrity of family lines and the transfer of property. The Kyrios ensured that wealth remained within the family, that marriages were strategic alliances, and that the social order was preserved. What happens if your husband, your Kyrios, dies? This brings another shift in your guardianship. If you had adult sons, one of them would likely become your new Kyrios. This could, in some cases, offer you a degree of greater practical autonomy, as an adult son might be more inclined to defer to his mother's wishes or allow her more freedom in managing the household. However, the legal framework remained. You still had a Kyrios. If you had no adult sons, the Kyriosship might pass to your late husband's brother, or even to your own father or brother if they were still alive and willing to assume the role. The key point is that you were never without one. Perhaps the most stark illustration of this system's power over a woman's life was the situation of the epikleros, the orphaned heiress. This woman was literally upon the inheritance. If a man died without male heirs, his daughter became the epikleros, tied by law to his estate. She was not allowed to inherit the property directly, nor could she choose her own husband. Instead, she was legally compelled to marry her closest male relative, even if he was already married, so that the inheritance would remain within the family. This was not about her personal happiness or desires. It was about the preservation of property and lineage. You, as the epikleros, would have no say in this. Your body, your future, your very purpose, would be legally dictated by the need to produce male heirs for your deceased father's estate. It is a powerful example of how a woman's existence was often defined by her reproductive capacity and her role in the perpetuation of the family name and wealth. The Kyrios system ensured that Athenian women were kept out of the public eye and public affairs. They could not vote, hold public office, serve on juries, or speak in the assembly. These roles were reserved for male citizens. Their world was the oikos, the household, and the Kyrios was the gatekeeper to the world beyond. He was the one who interacted with the legal and political structures of the city. He was the one who would defend your honor or your family's honor in a public dispute. He was the one who gave your daughters in marriage and negotiated dowries. Even for the wealthiest women, those with considerable dowries and large households, this fundamental dependency remained. The silk robes, the intricate jewelry, the many slaves tending to her every need, none of these conferred legal independence. Her status was high, certainly within the hierarchy of the household, but beneath the surface, the hand of the Kyrios was ever present, ever guiding. You might wonder if this system felt suffocating, limiting. For many it undoubtedly did. But for others, perhaps, it was simply the accepted order of things, a framework that provided security and a clear understanding of one's place in society. The Kyrios was, after all, meant to protect. He was there to ensure her safety, her financial well-being, her reputation. In a society where women were vulnerable, particularly if they lacked a strong family network, the Kyrios offered a crucial layer of protection. He was a buffer against the complexities and dangers of the outside world, a world not designed for her participation. Yet, this protection came at the cost of personal freedom and agency. You were always under someone's control, always represented by another's voice. Your identity was largely defined in relation to your male guardian. You were the daughter of so-and-so, the wife of so-and-so. Your individual achievements, your personal thoughts, your unique contributions, while perhaps valued within the family unit, rarely translated into public recognition or legal power. This pervasive system of guardianship, the omnipresent rule of the Kyrios, paints a vivid picture of the constraints under which Athenian women lived. It illuminates how their lives, while essential for the continuity of society, were fundamentally shaped by a legal structure that denied them independent personhood. It was a world where men held the keys to virtually every door beyond the threshold of the home. Understanding this fundamental legal reality is crucial to truly appreciate the silent power and immense resilience of the women who navigated this intricately regulated existence. Their story, so long overlooked, begins here in the shadow of the Kyrios. You have seen how the shadow of the Kyrios, the male guardian, stretched long over the lives of women in ancient Greece, dictating their legal standing, their public presence, their very identity. Your place, it seems, was largely confined to the oikos, the home, a realm of profound importance but one that rarely offered independent voice in the bustling agora or the halls of government. Yet, even within this tightly woven tapestry of patriarchal rule, there existed extraordinary threads of female authority, gleaming exceptions in the sacred realm. You are about to step into a different kind of world, one where women did not merely nurture life, but mediated between mortals and the gods themselves. Imagine, if you will, leaving the dusty streets of Athens behind. You journey northwest, the landscape growing wilder, more mountainous. You are headed for a place of immense spiritual power, a site that drew pilgrims and potentates from across the entire Greek world. You ascend the slopes of Mount Parnassus, the air growing crisp, the scent of pine and wild thyme filling your lungs. Ahead, carved into the dramatic cliffs, lies Delphi, the sanctuary of Apollo, and home to the most famous oracle in all antiquity. Here, in this revered place, the voice that spoke with the authority of a god belonged to a woman. She was the Pythia, the priestess of Apollo. You hear the murmurs of the crowd, a mix of hope, fear, and profound reverence. Petitioners, from kings seeking advice on war to farmers asking about their harvests, wait their turn, their destinies hanging on the words of this lone woman. She was not a queen, not a general, not a legislator, yet her pronouncements could shape empires, declare new colonies, and alter the course of history. No Kyrios dictated her actions here. She was a vessel, pure and independent, touched by the divine. You watch as the ritual unfolds. The Pythia, often an older woman chosen from the local villagers, ritually purifies herself. She descends into the Ataton, the inner sanctuary of the temple. Some accounts say she chews laurel leaves, sacred to Apollo, or inhales intoxicating fumes rising from a chasm in the earth. Whether induced by natural gases or the sheer psychological weight of her role, she enters a trance. Her voice, sometimes clear, sometimes a chaotic babble, becomes the conduit for Apollo himself. The priest, the male interpreter of the oracle, writes down her words, often rendering them into verse. Think for a moment about the power inherent in this position. This woman, perhaps illiterate, with no legal standing in the conventional sense, held sway over the most powerful men of her age. Her words were considered infallible, direct messages from a god. She embodied a form of authority that transcended the human laws that constrained other women. You see her not as a wife or a daughter, but as the Pythia, the mouthpiece of Apollo, an identity that subsumed all others. Her very being was defined by her divine connection. granting her an autonomy and influence almost unimaginable for any other woman in this ancient world. But the Pythia was not alone in her sacred power. Across Greece, in cities and secluded sanctuaries, women served as priestesses, holding esteemed public offices within religious cults. You return to Athens, the city you know, and walk towards the majestic Acropolis. There, overseeing the most important cult of the city, the worship of Athena Polias, the city goddess, stood her priestess. This priestess of Athena was a woman of noble birth, chosen for life, and held a position of immense prestige. You might see her leading sacred processions, her robes flowing, her presence commanding respect from all citizens. Her duties were manifold. She cared for the ancient olive wood statue of Athena, believed to have fallen from the heavens. She supervised the weaving of the great peplos, the ceremonial robe presented to the goddess during the Panathenaic festival. She held the keys to the Parthenon, the greatest temple in the Greek world. She presided over the most sacred rites of the city, ensuring the goodwill of Athena, whose protection was vital for Athens' prosperity and survival. Her influence was not merely symbolic. She offered prayers on behalf of the entire city. Her role was deeply intertwined with the civic identity and spiritual well-being of Athens. Unlike her sisters, whose lives were largely hidden from public view, she was a prominent figure, her name and lineage often recorded in inscriptions, a testament to her public importance. Move beyond Athens, and you find priestesses at the heart of nearly every significant cult. Consider the Eleusinian Mysteries, one of the most ancient and revered religious rites in Greece, centered around the goddesses Demeter and Persephone. These secret rituals, held at Eleusis, promised initiates a blessed afterlife. While the presiding priests were men, women played crucial roles, particularly the priestesses of Demeter, who were deeply involved in the preparatory rites and ceremonies. Both men and women could be initiated into the mysteries, and it was a rare space where women participated alongside men in a profound spiritual journey, escaping the mundane hierarchies of daily life. The priestesses here were not just performers of rituals, they were guardians of profound cosmic truths, key figures in the spiritual landscape that transcended social barriers. Journey to Argos, the ancient city with its powerful cult of Hera, queen of the gods. Here, the priestess of Hera held a position so vital that the city's calendar was even dated by her years of service. Her name would be used to mark time, a powerful acknowledgement of her central role in the civic and religious life of Argos. You imagine her, perhaps an older woman, wise and revered, walking through the temple precinct, her authority unquestioned. She managed the temple treasury, oversaw the sacred festivals, and served as a moral compass for the community. Why were these sacred roles open to women, often offering them a degree of public authority and autonomy denied in almost all other spheres? Perhaps it was because of their perceived purity, their connection to the feminine aspects of the divine, or their traditional association with fertility and the cycles of life and death, which were central to many ancient cults. Many goddesses, like Demeter, Artemis, Hecate, and even the Virgin Athena, had female attendants. It was believed that women could more naturally commune with the divine, acting as more fitting conduits for the goddess's wills. These priestesses were not under the direct control of Akirios in the performance of their duties. Their authority stemmed directly from the gods they served, and from the state or community that appointed them to these sacred offices. They could own property associated with their temples, manage significant funds, and make decisions that impacted entire cities. You would have seen them participating in public festivals, leading processions, offering sacrifices, and pronouncing sacred law. They stood outside the purely domestic sphere, enjoying a public visibility and reverence that was extraordinary for women of their time. Of course, their power was specific to the religious realm. It did not translate into voting rights, the ability to serve on juries, or hold political office. Their influence was spiritual, moral, and ceremonial, rather than legislative or military. Yet, within these boundaries, their power was immense. It was a power that derived not from physical might or legal decree, but from their unique ability to bridge the gap between the human and the divine. So, while the shadow of the Kyrios loomed large over Athenian women in their daily lives, you discover that in the hallowed precincts of the gods, a different kind of light shone. Here, women transcended the limitations imposed by society, becoming priestesses and prophets, revered figures who held the keys to sacred knowledge and divine communication. They remind you that even in a world of strict social norms, exceptions could be found, offering glimpses into a forgotten power wielded by women, a testament to their enduring significance in the spiritual heart of ancient Greece. You have journeyed with us through the enclosed courtyards and sacred precincts of ancient Athens, witnessing the delicate dance between societal confinement and spiritual empowerment for its women. You have seen how their lives were largely dictated by the oikos, the home, where their worth was measured by their modesty, their skill with the loom, and their capacity to bear sons who would become citizens. Their public voice, you learned, often found its clearest expression in the hymns and rituals offered to the gods. But now, you must leave the bustling agora and the shadowed Gynaikon of Athens behind. We transport you across the rugged Peloponnese, over treacherous mountain passes and through fertile valleys, to a land where the very air feels different, where the shouts of training warriors echo not from a distant gymnasium, but from the heart of the city itself. You are now in Sparta, a polis unlike any other, a society forged in the fires of military discipline, where the lives of women, like those of men, were utterly reimagined. As you step onto the Spartan plains, you immediately sense a distinct shift in the atmosphere. There are no grand walls here, no towering temples quite like those in Athens. Instead, you see a landscape of hardy resilience, populated by a people whose existence is dedicated to one singular purpose: the strength and survival of the Lacedaemonian state. And here you quickly realize the role of women is dramatically, profoundly different. Forget the veiled anonymity of your Athenian experience. Here, Spartan women move with an unburdened confidence, their heads often uncovered, their gaze direct and unflinching. They wear simple, practical tunics, often shorter than you might expect, allowing for freedom of movement. You see them walking through the city, overseeing estates, even participating in public festivals with a liberty that would be unthinkable for their Athenian sisters. From the moment a girl was born in Sparta, her destiny was intertwined with the needs of the state, just like her male counterparts. The goal was not to produce a demure homemaker, but a strong, healthy mother capable of bearing robust warrior sons. And to achieve this, Spartan girls underwent a regimen of physical training that would astonish you. Imagine yourself observing them. You see young girls, barely past childhood, running foot races in the stadium, their muscles taut, their breathing even. You watch them wrestle, their bodies grappling with an intensity that speaks of discipline and determination. They throw javelins, hurl discuses, practice jumping. These were not mere recreational activities. They were a fundamental part of their upbringing, designed to cultivate physical prowess, endurance, and mental toughness. This was the agoge for girls, a parallel, albeit distinct, system to the brutal training endured by Spartan boys. Their education was not limited to physical drills. Spartan girls also received instruction in music, poetry, and singing, often performing in public choruses. But even these artistic pursuits served a civic purpose, fostering a sense of community and instilling the values of the Spartan ethos. You would not find them meticulously learning to weave delicate tapestries or spending their days mastering intricate embroidery. Those domestic skills, so central to an Athenian woman's identity, were largely relegated to the Helot women, the enslaved population who performed the bulk of manual labor. Spartan women were free from such conventional domestic burdens, free to focus on their unique contributions to the polis. This freedom extended to their economic lives. As you observe Spartan society, you learn that women in Sparta held an astonishing degree of financial autonomy. Unlike Athenian women who could not legally own property independently, Spartan women could inherit land and manage their own estates. Over generations, this led to a significant accumulation of wealth in the hands of women. By some accounts, by the 4th century BCE, Spartan women owned as much as 2/5 of all the land in Laconia. This economic power granted them an influence and independence that was virtually unparalleled in the ancient Greek world. You might see a Spartan woman, not a Kyrios, overseeing the harvest in her fields, or negotiating with merchants in the market. This was her right, her inherited legacy, and her contribution to the stability of the state. Marriage in Sparta also followed a different rhythm. Spartan girls typically married later than their Athenian counterparts, often in their late teens or early 20s, after their physical training was complete and they were deemed strong enough for childbearing. Marriages were less about family alliances and dowries and more about producing healthy offspring for the state. While not entirely free of societal pressures, Spartan women arguably had more agency in choosing their partners, or at least in delaying marriage until they were ready. You might even hear stories of bride capture rituals, where a man would symbolically abduct his chosen bride, adding a layer of unconventional romance to their unions. The reputation of Spartan women was legendary throughout Greece. They were known for their sharp wit, their courage, and their often blunt directness. You hear tales of mothers sending their sons off to battle with the famous exhortation, "Come back with your shield or on it." This was not just a saying, it was a deeply held belief, reflecting the ultimate sacrifice expected for the state. Spartan women were proud of their unique status and were not afraid to voice it. When an Athenian woman supposedly scoffed at a Spartan woman, saying, "You Spartan women are the only ones who rule your men," the Spartan woman retorted, "Yes, because we are the only ones who bear real men." This exchange, whether apocryphal or not, perfectly encapsulates the Spartan woman's self-assured identity and her pride in her role as the mother of warriors. Now, let us transport you back to the narrow, dusty streets of Athens, to the quiet seclusion of the oikos. Here the contrast with Sparta could not be more stark. Imagine yourself within the inner chambers of an Athenian home. The air is still, perhaps fragrant with the scent of cypress or olive oil. An Athenian woman, often married young, perhaps as young as 14 or 15, spends her days managing the household. You would see her supervising the slaves, ensuring the pantry is stocked, the meals prepared, the water drawn. Her hands, unlike those of her Spartan counterpart, are likely engaged in the constant, meticulous work of spinning wool and weaving fabric, creating the clothes for her family and the intricate textiles that adorn their home. This was her domain, her sphere of influence, her golden cage. The virtues prized in an Athenian woman were modesty, chastity, and obedience. You would rarely see her outside the home, and when she did venture out for religious festivals or family occasions, she would be heavily veiled, accompanied by a male escort, and expected to move silently, attracting no attention. Her beauty was for her husband's eyes alone, and her voice, if heard outside the home, was considered improper. Her value to society was primarily as a producer of legitimate heirs for her husband, ensuring the continuation of his family line and the secure transfer of property. Her intellectual life, if any, was largely confined to the stories and traditions passed down within the family, or perhaps the limited instruction she received in basic literacy or music. Philosophers like Aristotle, reflecting Athenian societal norms, famously argued that women were by nature inferior to men, a kind of incomplete male, whose primary purpose was reproduction and domestic management. He believed women lacked the full capacity for reason and moral judgment that men possessed, thus justifying their subordinate position in the polis. This intellectual framework, deeply ingrained in Athenian thought, underpinned the legal and social structures that kept Athenian women largely confined. You feel the weight of these expectations, the invisible chains that tethered them to their homes, even as you remember their occasional bursts of spiritual power. So, you stand now at a crossroads, observing two vastly different visions of womanhood in ancient Greece. On one side, the Spartan woman, physically robust, economically independent, publicly visible, and valued for her direct contribution to the military strength of the state. She was a woman of iron will, free to move and speak, but her entire existence was still ultimately dictated by the needs of the polis, her individual aspirations perhaps secondary to her role as a mother of warriors. On the other side, the Athenian woman, cloistered, domesticated, intellectually less developed by societal design, her power residing within the household and the spiritual realm. Her life was a golden cage, adorned with the comforts of her home, yet constrained by societal expectations of purity, silence, and obedience. Her contribution was vital for the continuity of the Athenian family and the sanctity of its traditions. Which life, you ponder, was more free? It is a question that defies simple answers. The Spartan woman enjoyed greater physical and economic liberty, a public presence, and a certain respect for her assertiveness. Yet, her individual identity was still subsumed by the relentless demands of the state, her body molded and disciplined from birth for a singular purpose. The Athenian woman, in contrast, endured strict confinement and limited public agency, but perhaps she found a different kind of fulfillment within the sanctity of her oikos, in the nurturing of her family, and in her unique connection to the divine as a priestess or cult follower. Neither society offered women what we would consider true equality or personal autonomy today. Both were patriarchal, with men holding ultimate power. Yet, the stark differences between Sparta and Athens reveal that even within the confines of ancient Greek patriarchy, the experiences of women were incredibly diverse. Their roles were shaped not by an immutable, pan-Hellenic ideal, but by the specific political, economic, and cultural needs of their respective polis. You have witnessed how the very foundation of a society, whether it prioritizes military might and civic discipline or democratic ideals and intellectual pursuits, profoundly dictates the lives and expectations placed upon its women. The Spartan woman, with her athletic prowess and land ownership, stands as a testament to what was possible when a state deliberately empowered its female citizens for its own unique survival. The Athenian woman, with her loom and her domestic skills, reminds you of the profound importance placed on family, lineage, and the quiet, unseen labor that sustained one of the ancient world's most vibrant intellectual centers. These two contrasting pictures illuminate the multifaceted reality of women's lives, proving that there was no single forgotten woman in ancient Greece, but rather a spectrum of experiences, each shaped by the powerful currents of their time and place. You have walked with us through the grand homes of Athens and the training grounds of Sparta, witnessing the lives of women who, for all their differences, shared the fundamental status of citizen. You have seen how the state, in its wisdom or its prejudice, dictated their roles, their freedoms, and their very identities. Yet, for every citizen woman, whether she spun wool in a quiet Athenian courtyard or threw javelins on a Spartan field, countless other women populated the vibrant, bustling world of ancient Greece. Their lives, often less documented, less celebrated, and infinitely more precarious, formed the true bedrock of society. These are the lives lived beneath the pedestal, the women who moved through the shadows and the marketplaces, whose stories are etched not in grand pronouncements but in the grit and grind of daily existence. You stand now in a different kind of agora, a place where the air thrums with a different energy, where conventions are sometimes bent, if not broken. Imagine yourself stepping into a world that, for all its strictures, offered pathways to independence for a select few women, paths utterly inaccessible to their citizen counterparts. Here, in the twilight glow of a lamplit symposium, or perhaps in the lively chatter of a bustling market square, you might encounter a hetaira. Do not confuse her with the common streetwalker. That would be a grave misunderstanding of her unique position. The hetaira, whose name literally means companion, occupied a highly specialized and often prestigious role in Greek society. She was an educated woman, often exceptionally intelligent, skilled in music, dance, and engaging conversation. She moved freely in a world closed off to respectable citizen women, attending symposia, those all-male drinking parties that were the epicenters of intellectual and political discourse. You watch as she enters a room, perhaps a private dining hall in Athens. Her presence sparks an immediate shift in atmosphere. Men rise to greet her. She is not veiled, her clothing is fine, perhaps even daring. Her hair is intricately styled. She speaks with wit, debating philosophy, reciting poetry, offering shrewd political insights. She is a woman of her own mind, her own voice. Her company is sought after by the most prominent men of the city, statesmen, philosophers, artists. She might be a muse, a confidant, an intellectual equal. Consider Aspasia, the most famous hetaira of them all. You hear whispers of her relationship with Pericles, the great Athenian statesman, a man so devoted that he divorced his citizen wife to live with her. She was a teacher of rhetoric, a political advisor, a woman whose salon attracted the brightest minds of the era, including Socrates himself. You might find it astonishing that a non-citizen woman could wield such influence, could be celebrated for her intellect and charm, while a citizen woman was expected to remain largely unseen and unheard. But this freedom came at a cost, a fundamental separation from the very society she navigated with such grace. A hetaira was never a wife in the traditional sense. Her children often lacked full citizen rights. Her independence was often bought with her beauty and her body, her livelihood dependent on male patronage. Yet, within these constraints, she carved out a remarkable space. You see her commanding respect, enjoying financial autonomy, and possessing an education that few citizen women ever received. She navigated a liminal space, an outsider who was, paradoxically, at the very heart of the intellectual and social life of the city. Now, shift your gaze from the elegant symposium to the dusty, noisy streets, where the scent of baking bread mingles with the tang of salt and the sweat of labor. Here you encounter the artisan women, the backbone of the bustling Greek economy. Forget the idealized images of women confined to the oikos, the home. For countless women, particularly those of the lower classes, work was not an option but a necessity for survival. You walk through the agora at dawn. The air is cool but activity is already stirring. You hear the rhythmic clack of looms from open doorways. Women are spinning wool, dyeing cloth, weaving intricate patterns for tunics and cloaks. This is not just domestic work. For many, it is a trade, a livelihood. You see women hunched over pottery wheels, shaping clay into utilitarian vessels or delicate oil lamps. Others are kneading dough, their strong hands dusted with flour, preparing the day's bread for the city's hungry populace. Outside a modest shop, a woman haggles over the price of fish, her voice strong and clear. She is a vendor, selling vegetables she has grown or goods she has purchased from farmers outside the city walls. You see older women, their faces lined with sun and toil, serving as wet nurses, suckling the infants of wealthier families, or working as midwives, ushering new lives into the world with practiced hands. These are women with practical skills, whose contributions were indispensable to the daily functioning of the polis. They were not merely consumers but producers, participants in the economic engine of ancient Greece. Imagine the physical demands of their lives. You feel the strain in your own hands as you envision carrying heavy amphorae of water from the public fountain, grinding grain into flour with a heavy stone pestle, or spending hours bent over a steaming dye vat. Their bodies were tools, their strength a valuable asset. Their independence was not intellectual or social like that of the hetaira but economic. They were often the primary providers for their families, their labor sustaining homes that might otherwise fall into destitution. Yet even beneath these working women, a vast multitude existed in the deepest shadows, their voices all but silenced by the unforgiving structures of ancient society. You now step into a world where human beings were treated as commodities, their lives defined by servitude, their wills often broken by brutal force. You are now face to face with the enslaved women of ancient Greece. Their numbers were staggering. It is estimated that in some Greek cities, enslaved people constituted 1/3, or even more of the population. Enslaved women came from all walks of life, snatched from conquered lands, sold into bondage by desperate families, or born into slavery, their fate sealed from the moment of their first breath. They were the anonymous workforce that underpinned every aspect of Greek life, from the grandest temples to the humblest homes. You see them everywhere, yet often you are encouraged not to truly see them. In the grand Athenian household, you observe an enslaved woman diligently tending the hearth, preparing meals, cleaning the intricate mosaics, assisting the lady of the house with her toilet. She might be a nursemaid caring for the citizen children, a constant presence in their early lives, yet denied the right to raise her own offspring in freedom. Her day begins before dawn and ends long after the rest of the household sleeps. Her labor is unending, her personal desires unheard. Walk a little further beyond the city walls. You come across vast agricultural estates, where enslaved women toil alongside enslaved men in the fields, planting, harvesting, weeding under the scorching sun. Their backs ache, their hands are calloused, their spirits often weary. In the silver mines of Laurion, a place of unimaginable hardship, enslaved women and children, along with men, were forced into dark, cramped tunnels, extracting ore until their bodies gave out. These were lives of brutal exploitation, far from any romanticized notions of antiquity. And then there were the enslaved women forced into prostitution, often held in brothels run by their owners. Their bodies were not their own. Their dignity was systematically stripped away. They were objects, not people, their existence a stark reminder of the darkest corners of human cruelty. Consider the absolute lack of agency. An enslaved woman had no legal rights, no family protection, no claim to her own body or her children. She could be bought, sold, beaten, or even killed by her owner with little fear of reprisal. Her identity was entirely subsumed by her status as property. You feel the chill of despair that must have permeated their daily existence, the constant fear, the utter vulnerability. Their stories, if they could even be called stories, are largely absent from the historical record, overshadowed by the narratives of citizens and the powerful. We know them mostly through the laws that govern them as property, or through the passing remarks of their owners. To truly understand the forgotten lives of women in ancient Greece, you must acknowledge this vast, suffering population, whose silent endurance made possible the achievements of the celebrated few. So, you have journeyed across a vast, complex landscape of female experience in ancient Greece. From the powerful Spartan citizen to the cloistered Athenian wife, from the intellectually vibrant hetaira to the diligent artisan, and finally to the nameless, voiceless enslaved woman, you have witnessed a spectrum of lives as diverse as the cities themselves. There was no single, monolithic experience of womanhood in this ancient world. Instead, you find a tapestry woven with threads of privilege and poverty, freedom and servitude, influence and invisibility. The women beneath the pedestal, those who lived beyond the ideal, the extraordinary, or the documented, often bore the heaviest burdens, yet their labor, their resilience, and their silent contributions were as essential to the flourishing of ancient Greece as any grand philosophy or architectural marvel. Their stories, though fragmented and faint, speak volumes about the multifaceted reality of a world far more intricate and human than the marble statues and epic poems often suggest. You leave this place with a deeper understanding, knowing that the echoes of their lives, even in their quietness, resonate still. You stand now on the precipice of understanding the deepest, most defining role for the majority of women in ancient Greece, that of the mother. You have explored the lives of the extraordinary, the influential, and the invisible. But for most women, regardless of their social standing, their very purpose, their very essence, was inextricably linked to their ability to bear and raise children. This was not merely a personal choice, but a societal imperative, woven into the fabric of their culture, their religion, and their very survival. Imagine yourself in a dimly lit home, the scent of wood smoke and dried herbs lingering in the air. You hear the soft murmur of women's voices, the distant laughter of children playing in the courtyard. Here, within the private sphere of the oikos, the household, a woman found her primary domain, and her value was largely measured by her contribution to its future. You see her, perhaps a young bride, recently married, the weight of expectation already upon her shoulders. Marriage itself, for women, was not primarily about romantic love as we understand it today, but a pragmatic arrangement, a transfer of property and status, with the explicit goal of procreation. A girl, often barely into her teens, would be given in marriage, leaving the protection of her father's house to enter the household of her husband. Her dowry, carefully arranged, represented her family's contribution to the new union, providing for her future security and status. But her true value to her new family, to her husband, and to the wider community, lay in her womb. Her most sacred duty, the highest honor she could achieve, was to provide legitimate heirs, especially sons who would continue the family line, inherit property, and perform the essential ancestral rites. You feel the palpable tension in the air as a young wife awaits her first pregnancy. Each month that passed without conception brought a whisper of anxiety. In a world where families were the fundamental units of society, and the continuity of the family line was paramount, barrenness was a profound tragedy, a source of shame and often, a legitimate reason for divorce. You hear the prayers offered to goddesses like Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, and Demeter, the goddess of fertility, pleas for a blessing, for a sign of new life. And then comes the moment, the intense, dangerous journey of childbirth. You hear the cries, the strained breathing, the urgent whispers of the attending women, the midwives. Childbirth in ancient Greece was a perilous endeavor, a threshold between life and death for both mother and child. Without modern medicine, without sanitation, infection was rampant and complications were often fatal. You know that for many women, the act of bringing new life into the world was also the act that ended their own. The tombstone epitaphs you might encounter often commemorate women who died in childbirth, a poignant testament to the risks they faced, honoring them as heroines of the home. If a child survived, if the mother survived, a new chapter began. You watch as the newborn is presented to the father. His acceptance or rejection determined its fate. While rare, the practice of exposure, leaving an unwanted infant to die, was a harsh reality, particularly for female infants, who were seen as a lesser investment than sons in a patrilineal society. But for those embraced, a bond began, a profound connection between mother and child. Within the confines of the oikos, the mother reigns supreme over the nursery. You see her cradling her infant, singing lullabies passed down through generations. You observe her teaching her young daughters the skills they would need for their own future households. Spinning, weaving, managing provisions, understanding the rhythms of the home. For her sons, she provided the initial nurturing and moral guidance during their tender years, before they were taken from her influence to be educated by male tutors or to participate in the public life of the polis. Even then, the lessons learned at their mother's knee, the comfort of her presence, would leave an indelible mark. The mother was the heart of the household, not just a biological vessel. You understand that her labor was relentless, though often invisible to the chroniclers of history. She managed the slaves if the family was wealthy enough to own them. She oversaw the preparation of food, the making of clothes, the general upkeep of the home. She was the healer, often possessing knowledge of herbal remedies and basic medicine. She instilled values, taught myths and legends, and prepared her children for their respective roles in Greek society. This was her silent power, her profound influence, shaping the minds and characters of the next generation. You witnessed the joys and sorrows that punctuated a mother's life. The delight in a child's first steps, the pride in a son's burgeoning intellect, the hope for a daughter's prosperous marriage. But also the ever-present shadow of loss. Infant mortality was tragically high. You feel the crushing grief of a mother who watched her child succumb to illness, a heartache that transcended time and culture, yet was a far more frequent occurrence in this ancient world. The rituals of mourning, the careful laying out of the tiny body, the silent tears shed within the private rooms of the home, were a constant feature of life. For women in ancient Greece, their legacy, their form of immortality, was not carved in marble or written in epic poetry, but carried in the blood and spirit of their children. You realize that a woman's name might be forgotten by history, but her genetic contribution, her nurturing, her lessons, continued through her offspring. Her sons carried on the family name, performed the ancestral rites that kept the family's memory alive, and her daughters in turn became mothers, perpetuating the cycle of life, love, and silent labor. You consider the stark reality. A woman's public identity was largely overshadowed by her male relatives, her father, her husband, her sons. Yet, within the private sphere she was the anchor, the nurturer, the silent architect of future generations. Her contributions were fundamental, not merely supplementary to the flourishing of Greek society. Without her, there would be no citizens, no soldiers, no philosophers, no artisans, no continuation of the very civilization you have been exploring. You see that the forgotten lives of women in ancient Greece are not truly forgotten when you look closely at the enduring legacy they bequeathed. Their sacrifices, their daily toil, their fears and their profound love, resonated through the generations. Every citizen who voted in the assembly, every soldier who fought in battle, every poet who composed verses, every sculptor who shaped stone, carried within them the imprint of a mother who had brought them into the world, nurtured them, and prepared them for life. You reflect on the vast majority of women whose stories were never written down, whose names were lost to time, but whose essential role as mothers shaped the very DNA of ancient Greek society. They were the silent bearers of the future, ensuring not only the survival of their individual families but also the continuity of their culture, their traditions, and their very existence. Their quiet strength, their unwavering dedication to their children, ensured that the flame of Hellenic civilization continued to burn brightly, passed from one generation to the next, carried on the shoulders of the mothers who lived and loved and labored beneath the sun of ancient Greece. You walk away with a profound appreciation for these women, the mothers who formed the unshakable foundation of a civilization, their lives a testament to resilience, love, and the quiet power of creating and nurturing life itself. Their echoes, you realize, are not just faint whispers, but the very heartbeat of history. You stand now at the precipice of a different kind of journey. Not through the sun-drenched streets or the bustling agora, but into the quiet, often overlooked corners where fragments of these forgotten lives might still reside. Your task, should you choose to accept it, is to become a historical detective, an archaeologist of the written word, sifting through the layers of time to unearth the whispers that have long been buried beneath centuries of male-centric narratives. The heartbeat of history, you realized, is indeed there. But how do we listen to it when so much of it was recorded by men, about men, and for men? The ancient world, particularly ancient Greece, presents a formidable challenge. The vast majority of surviving texts were authored by men, poets, philosophers, historians, orators. They spoke of battles, politics, grand ideas, and the actions of great men. Women, when they appeared, were often peripheral characters, symbols, or the subjects of prescriptive advice. Their inner lives, their daily struggles, their unique perspectives, were rarely deemed worthy of extensive record. Yet silence is not absence. The absence of a prominent voice does not mean the absence of a life. It simply means we must look harder, listen more closely, and interpret with a finer ear. You step now into the metaphorical archives, a vast collection not just of papyrus scrolls and clay tablets, but of every artifact, every inscription, every line of verse that has survived the ravages of time. Imagine yourself in a dimly lit library, the air thick with the scent of old paper and dust, though the ancient equivalent would be a storeroom filled with rolled scrolls. You reach for a text, perhaps a play by Euripides or Sophocles. On the surface, these are tales of heroes and gods, of kings and queens. But look closer, listen to the choruses, to the laments of the female characters. While filtered through a male playwright's lens, these narratives still offer a window, however small, into the emotional landscape, the societal expectations, and the tragic fates that could befall women. You hear the despair of Medea, the steadfastness of Antigone, the grief of Hecuba. These are not direct voices, perhaps, but they are reflections, shadows cast by real women and their struggles in that world. You turn next to the poets. Sappho, of course, is a luminous exception, a woman whose own voice reached across the millennia, singing of love and longing from the island of Lesbos. Her fragments are precious, revealing an intimate world of female relationships and emotions. But beyond Sappho, you find other male poets who occasionally touch upon the lives of ordinary women. Consider the domestic scenes hinted at in the lyrical verses, the idealized wives in elegies, or the sharp observations in comedy that, even in jest, reveal societal norms and gender roles. These are not always flattering portrayals, but they are data points, clues to how women were perceived and, perhaps, how they lived within those perceptions. Now, shift your focus from the grand literary narratives to the more mundane, the bureaucratic, the legal. These are often the driest texts, but they are also some of the most revealing. You delve into legal codes, court speeches, and property records. Here, women appear not as dramatic figures, but as parties in disputes, as inheritors, as those for whom dowries were arranged. You see them as they engaged with the economic realities of their time, limited though their agency might have been. A woman might not speak in court herself, but a male relative might speak on her behalf, and his words, preserved on a papyrus, can tell you much about her status, her property, her lineage, and even the circumstances that brought her into the public legal sphere. Consider, for example, the laws surrounding marriage and divorce. You learn about the expectations placed upon a wife, her duties within the oikos, the household. You see the mechanisms through which a woman might be divorced or, more rarely, initiate a separation. These legal frameworks, while restrictive, define the boundaries of female existence and hint at the daily negotiations and power dynamics within households. They show you not just the ideal but the potential for conflict and the mechanisms for its resolution, even when heavily biased against women. Next, you move into the realm of inscriptions. These are stone tablets, pottery shards, and grave markers. Here you find voices that are, in some ways, more direct. Epitaphs on tombs, for instance, commemorate the deceased. While often written by male relatives, they sometimes include lines praising a woman's virtues. Her skill at weaving, her piety, her devotion to her children, her quiet wisdom. These are not autobiographies, but they are glimpses into what was valued in a woman, and sometimes, a poignant reflection of a life lived. You might find a dedication to a goddess from a woman seeking a blessing for her family, or a simple name etched on a vase, connecting it to its female owner or maker. These are small fragments, but each one is a precious data point, a direct link to a woman's presence in the physical world. Then there is archaeology. This is where the physical world itself speaks. You walk through the ruins of an ancient house. The layout of the rooms, the presence of a loom weight in one corner, cooking implements in another, small cosmetic jars, children's toys, these silent objects paint a vivid picture of daily life. They reveal the spaces women inhabited, the tasks they performed, the objects they interacted with. A beautifully crafted piece of jewelry tells you about status and adornment. A spindle whorl speaks of hours spent spinning wool, a fundamental task in almost every ancient Greek household. Grave goods, too, are incredibly telling. What was buried with a woman? Sometimes it is simple pottery, sometimes jewelry, sometimes medical instruments, indicating a specific profession. These items, chosen by her family, reflect not only her social standing but also aspects of her identity and perhaps even her aspirations. They are nonverbal testimonies to lives lived and remembered, offering a counterpoint to the male-dominated literary record. Consider the art. Vases, frescoes, sculptures. While much of it depicts mythical scenes or male activities, There are also depictions of women engaged in domestic chores, attending religious ceremonies or participating in festivals. You see them fetching water, preparing food, spinning thread, engaging in rituals. These visual records offer a powerful complement to the textual evidence, allowing you to visualize the roles and activities that defined much of women's lives. You observe the clothing they wore, the hairstyles they favored, the postures they adopted, giving you a tangible sense of their physical presence. Even philosophical texts, though deeply patriarchal, can be illuminating. When Plato or Aristotle discuss the nature of women, their proper role in society, or their perceived deficiencies, they are inadvertently revealing the prevailing attitudes and assumptions of their time. These texts, while often infuriating in their misogyny, are critical for understanding the intellectual and social environment in which women lived. They tell you what men thought about women, which is a crucial part of understanding the pressures and expectations women faced. Medical texts, too, offer a unique perspective. Hippocratic writings, for example, detail treatments for female ailments, discuss pregnancy and childbirth, and reveal ancient understandings or misunderstandings of the female body. While written by men, often with speculative or superstitious elements, these texts provide insight into the physical realities and health challenges women encountered, from menstruation to childbirth, and the care they received or sought. The process of unearthing these forgotten voices is not a simple excavation of complete narratives. It is more like piecing together a vast, intricate mosaic from shattered fragments. You are looking for echoes in a well, ripples in a pond, faint outlines in the dust. It requires patience, an open mind, and a willingness to read between the lines, to infer and to synthesize. You must ask not just what the text says, but what it implies about the lives of women, what it omits, and why. This detective work demands a critical eye, always aware that you are often seeing women through the filters of male authors, male artists, and male lawmakers. Your task is to peel back those layers, to discern the faint yet persistent presence of the women themselves. You are seeking not just famous figures but the vast majority, the mothers, the wives, the daughters, the enslaved women, the artisans, the priestesses whose daily lives, though uncelebrated by their contemporaries, formed the very fabric of ancient Greek society. You realize that every spindle whirl, every broken shard of pottery with a woman's name, every passing mention in a court speech, every depiction on a vase is a victory. Each fragment is a testament that their lives were lived, their contributions were made, and their experiences, though silenced for centuries, were real. These are the archival echoes, the whispers from the past that, when carefully pieced together, begin to form a chorus, reminding you that the ancient Greek world was not solely a world of men, but a world where women, in their own spaces and in their own ways, lived, loved, labored, and left their indelible mark. Their stories are not lost forever. They are simply waiting for you to find them, to listen, and to give them voice once more.